and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the latest edition of the Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host, Suliman Rafiq, and we are broadcasting live today on Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025, sending our positive airways out to Luton and surrounding areas. As always, it's fantastic to have your interaction on the show, so please do get in touch, and you can do that on WhatsApp via 07779 481822. That number again, 07779 481822. So on today's Health and Fitness Show, we'll be discussing two issues particularly. The first one will be regarding loneliness, and the second one will be talking about fatherhood and what that means in the 21st century. However, as I said, today is Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025, and it's hot. It's hot out there. I'm sweating, and everyone is. And it would be amiss of me on the Health and Fitness Show not to highlight how important it is for us all to try and beat the heat and staying safe in this hot weather. So I'd love to actually hear, listeners, what do you guys do to stay comfortable and in this hot weather? So you can text or WhatsApp us on 07779 481822. And as you may have heard in the news, an amber health alert has now been issued across the whole of England as temperatures have reached above 30 degrees. And for those of you who don't like the heat, there's bad news, because by this weekend, temperatures are forecasted to hit highs of 33. So what the NHS and UK HSA do is give out some practical information in regards to ensuring how we can all take care of ourselves and each other to ensure that we don't become dehydrated or suffer from either heat exhaustion or indeed heat stroke. So some of those top tips are to keep out of the sun at the hottest times of the days, to keep your home cool, and you can do that by closing windows and curtains in rooms that face the sun. And if you do go outside, this is really important that you do apply sunscreen. I know it's a habit that I haven't traditionally got into, but I've absolutely taken that on board more recently, and also the importance of seeking shade and drinking lots of water. And finally, just the key message that everyone's kind of putting out there is important, particularly to keep an eye on any family, friends and neighbours who may be at higher risk of becoming unwell. So example of that is older people, but also people that have underlying health conditions. So they do need to take particular care during this hot weather. And finally, there is a dua that is read during the time of hot weather, which is translated to, there is no deity except Allah. How hot is this day? Allah, protect me from the heat of the hellfire. Ameen. So in conclusion, guys, please do take care of yourselves, but also really importantly, do take care of each other. So thank you for bearing with me with that. And hopefully this weekend is enjoyable, but everyone stays safe and looks after each other at the same time. So without further ado, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a plethora of expert guests. And I really want to thank them for giving up their time this evening. Firstly, we'll be talking to Hannah, who will be discussing the work that's been happening around loneliness. Welcome, Hannah, to Inspire FM.
Hello, thanks for having me. I just want to point out I have got a huge bottle of water.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. There you go. You made my day. Excellent. It's good to see you drink. You've been drinking it as well. So, keep that up. But you're going to need it this weekend. So don't lose the bottle. Could you just introduce yourself for those who haven't met you before?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Hannah Beatrice, and I am the campaign manager for Loneliness Awareness Week.
Fantastic. And Hannah, can you just tell us a little bit more about the organisation that you work with?
Yeah, of course. So I work for Marmalade Trust. They are a charity that an award-winning charity. They work with people who experience loneliness of all ages. They are based in the southwest, but growing across the UK at the moment. they started in 2013 by our founder, Amy Perrin. Amy was working at the time as an occupational therapist, and she found that a lot of the people that she was working with were going to be on their own at Christmas time. So Amy then took it on herself to make sure that didn't happen and connect those people, and they all had Christmas dinner together. And the response to that was so overwhelming that that's continued to this day, and that's now known as Christmas Cheer, which is a project that Marmalade Trust do every year at Christmas time. But as we know, obviously, loneliness doesn't just happen at Christmas. It can happen all the time. People can experience it at all times. So there is a project called Marmalade Connections, which is the one that's expanding at the moment. And that works with volunteers, trained volunteers, to connect them with someone who's experiencing what we call persistent loneliness, or more well known as chronic loneliness. So that means they might be feeling lonely kind of most or all of the time. And we pair them with a volunteer who then gets to know kind of what hobbies they're interested in, what support services they might need, and then works with them on a one-to-one basis to help them rediscover those things, help them kind of get the support they need, and hopefully get them out of that loneliness they're experiencing. So that's something that we work on all year round. And then in 2017, we also started Loneliness Awareness Week, which is the only week which is dedicated to raising awareness of loneliness.
Fantastic, great. And yeah, it was as a result of the work that you're doing around Loneliness Awareness Week that I saw this topic come up on my friend's WhatsApp status, and they were just highlighting the importance of talking about loneliness, and particularly how, you know, you can even feel lonely even when you're surrounded by people. So maybe that's something we can come on to talk about as well. I'm conscious I'm being extremely rude, so we have some fantastic guests in the studio who've also given up their time to be with us this evening. So if I could just very quickly ask them to also introduce themselves. So Sharon, can I start with yourself?
I'm Sharon Hill, and I'm the Community Volunteer Coordinator for the project Flying Start.
Hi, and thanks for having me on. My name is Ash McCormack. My principal role is a senior lecturer at the University of Bedfordshire, but I work with Sharon developing and coordinating the dads group that we have once a month in the town.
Fantastic. Great, thank you guys. And so what the guys in the studio are here to talk about will be the work that around fatherhood particularly, and so I'm super excited to be talking about that as a father of three. Got lots of learning to do, so I'm really excited to join in that conversation as we go forward. So thank you for giving up your warm evening to be with us here on Inspire FM. Hannah, if I can come back to yourself, you were just talking there around the work that's been done to create Loneliness Awareness Week. You know, we have a lot of these different types of awareness campaigns, but why do you feel it's particularly important to raise awareness on this topic?
Yeah, sure. So loneliness is a natural human emotion. It's something that we all experience at some point in our lives. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't acknowledge that we're experiencing it, then it can be something that can become persistent chronic loneliness, which is what I mentioned earlier. And that's when it can have really, really big impact on our physical and mental health. So I don't know if you've heard the stat about loneliness can be as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we're talking really serious impacts on our health. And then, you know, like I said, it's not a mental health issue, but if it becomes something that we're experiencing consistently, then we can retreat from our communities, we can isolate more, and that's when it can start to impact our mental health as well. So, you know, Loneliness Awareness Week exists to get people talking about loneliness. You know, like you said, you saw it on your friend's WhatsApp, so that's fantastic. That's exactly what it's there for. It's to get people feeling like they have a safe space where they can talk about it and connect with others. So by providing those, we hope to kind of be proactive in stopping loneliness from reaching the point where you know, someone hasn't talked about it. So, for example, this year's campaign was actually all about reducing stigma, and the number one thing we know to do to help reduce stigma is to talk about loneliness. But yet we did some research with Ipsos, and whilst over 80% of people said, yeah, I've experienced loneliness at some point, more than 60% of those people said that they've never ever told anyone about it. And I'm sure that we all probably can reflect that experience in our own feelings now, if we're thinking, you know, actually, well, I've probably felt lonely, but I've never talked about it. I know that that's the case for myself as well. So by starting those conversations, you know, we actually had we reached more than 7 million people across social media this year. So that just shows how big the conversation's got. That's more than 10% of the UK population were talking about loneliness during Loneliness Awareness Week. And, you know, more than 5,000 connection activities were happening across the world as well. We had 21 countries who got involved this year. And we had all of that on our website. So basically people could put a connection activity that they were running on our connections map, and that meant that anyone in that area could see things that are happening in their area. And Loneliness Awareness Week, what I just want to make clear is, like, it's a platform for people who are, you know, a lot of this stuff is happening all the time. These connection activities are happening all the time. Some people did stuff especially for Loneliness Awareness Week, but there are people who are doing loads of work in the community all the time, all year round. And I think it just really provides also a platform for all of those people to be able to say, look, this is what we're doing, and then connect people who then hear a conversation about loneliness and can go, actually, that really sounds like me. I feel like I'm experiencing that. And then they can go and find an activity that's near them that they might not have sought out previously or been able to find. So I think that, you know, Loneliness Awareness Week has a really big impact with just starting that conversation in a safe way.
Amazing. And it's a phenomenal reach that you've had there. So congratulations. However, you managed to kind of pull that off, because, 10% of the UK population is massive. And just in terms of, you know, you've said there's the research seems to suggest there's a lot of stigma in relation to talking about loneliness. I mean, in obviously 2025, why do you think that still is? What did the research say about why the stigma still exists?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to what you said about the reach, I think that that's just testament to the fact that this is an experience that everyone experiences. So we could all resonate with it, which is why I think so many people actually take part in that conversation. But yeah, to the research, what we found was, whilst over 60% of people said they didn't talk about it, but they also then stated the reasons that they didn't talk about it. And those included things like feeling ashamed, feeling embarrassed, fear of being judged. So all of those show that there is a stigma attached to loneliness. And, you know, just if we think about kind of that archetypal image of somebody who's lonely, a lot of people imagine that, you know, it's just a certain type of person, or it's a person of a certain age, or someone who, you know, doesn't have any friends. But that is completely untrue. We know that actually one of the loneliest age groups in the UK at the moment are 16 to 24-year-olds. And they can have loads of friends. You can be lonely in a room surrounded by people, and if you don't feel like you connect with those people on some sort of emotional level, then you can feel very, very alone. And, you know, I think that's why we have this kind of stigma around it. And actually, the information and the stats and the research that's been done by ourselves and more widely, you know, I think the BBC did some research as well that showed that it was young people who are experiencing loneliness, just demonstrates that we're not talking about it, but we are experiencing it. And that is because we still feel ashamed.
Excellent, thank you. So listeners, you're here live with us on the 19th of June 2025 here on Inspire 105.1 FM. As always, if you'd like to get in touch and give us your feelings on how this is resonating with you, you can text or WhatsApp us on 07779 481822. That number again, 07779 481822. I'm conscious we're talking about young people, and we've got an expert in the room. I don't know if he would mind if I put him on the spot. I mean, actually, your kind of reflections on what's been discussed, particularly around the young people aspect.
I think it's difficult. I think social media has a large influence on that. Certainly, I can relate in terms of my own childhood, which was a long time ago. My friends were my community, were people on the housing estates that I grew up with. Whereas now I have a 13-year-old son, and I'm just conscious of the fact is that something between the difference between popularity and friendships. So when particularly on social media, you're doing the blue ticks, you're on TikToks, you're doing Instagrams and all of that sort of stuff. And in a world where perhaps popularity is seen as being very important, it sometimes feels as if being connected to someone or something takes a back seat. And I'm not sure whether that's something that your other speaker can sort of resonate, but I think particularly about 16 to 24, there's so much going on. You're still not fully formed as an adult. There's still a lot of experimentation going on. So I think there is a lot of pressure to be the popular person, but the attractive person, the happy-go-lucky, the facade of being happy all the time, when actually behind it. Because I think even recently there's some news where somebody had an influencer had many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers, but talked quite lonely about that wasn't friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely a difference there. And if I can just come back in terms of some of the work that's being done. So I noticed on the website the work that was being done around the loneliness guide. Can you just explain what that is? Just talk us through that, please.
Yeah, of course. And actually in the loneliness guide, I believe there is something about the social media conversation, because that comes up a lot. And we were actually talking about that during Loneliness Awareness Week. I presented a panel discussion to launch it in Bristol. And one of the people on the panel, she runs the Lonely Club on Instagram. And she's had a lot of personal experiences that she talks very openly. She's called Lara on Instagram, but also uses it as a really positive way of building a community. And so we had there's lots of different sides to that conversation, because a lot of the conversation about social media is how you use it, and you can use it as a great connector as well. But it is something that also, we do need to be mindful of. So just to respond to that. But in terms of the Understanding Loneliness Guide, it's on our website. You can find it. It's, as I mentioned, ways that you can get involved in Loneliness Awareness Week. There's having a conversation, and then also running a connection activity. But really, at its basic level, one of the key things is you might just want to learn more about loneliness and understand it. And there's lots and lots of guides out there, but we have one on our website which just really introduces the why, what, how, whens of loneliness. And I think, it's something that when I first learned about it, it was really new to me. So I think it's not something that people necessarily think about, is loneliness, what loneliness actually is. It's so in its purest form, it's actually just a mismatch between the connections that we want and the connections that we have, because some people can actually be happier with fewer connections. So we're not saying all isolation is bad, or people being on their own is bad, because some people feel happier in certain times when they're on their own. We're just saying that when you notice there's a mismatch between connection you're getting and connection that you actually want, that's when loneliness occurs. So, it talks about that. And then it also talks about the times when you can experience loneliness most. And normally it's any time where there's a big change in your life. So whether it can be any time, when you're younger, when you're starting a new school, or when you're starting a new job, or if you're grieving the end of a friendship or the loss of a loved one. Motherhood can be really, you can feel really lonely when you become a mum, because you can feel, like you're the only one. So, when you retire, there's lots of life, we call them key life indicators, but there's lots of times in your life when you can be more likely to experience loneliness. And actually there are people who are more likely to experience it as well. So whether you feel like you're not able to access certain services, or you feel like a minority in certain situations, then you can start to feel more likely to experience loneliness as well. So the Understanding Loneliness Guide is just a really great introduction to that. And it helps you, because one of the issues we have is when people experience loneliness, and this has definitely been my personal experience as well, we don't always recognize that that's what we're experiencing, because we don't even think of it as this natural human emotion, because of the stigma. So really recognizing that we're experiencing loneliness is kind of a great first step. And then we can obviously take that action. So that it's all in the Loneliness Guide.
Fantastic. So for anyone who'd like to access that, the website is www.lonelinessawarenessweek.org/loneliness-guide. And there's all of the information that's just been described and more within that. So definitely take your time to have a look at that. And I think if I've learned anything today, is that definition that you gave around loneliness being the mismatch between the connection you're getting and the connection you want, because I think that's often, I think of friends and family where actually their idea of bliss is just being by themselves, but that's what they want. So that's fine. that's not a problem. They're not lonely. That's just how they are. So I think it's really helpful for you to have described that. So thank you for doing. So I'm conscious we do only have 6 minutes left until we reach the end of this half of the show, and I'm just conscious that there may be listeners out there who are listening to this and are thinking, are connecting to it in terms of actually recognizing that they are feeling lonely, and so what should they do?
Yeah, and I mean, you said that you really like that kind of explanation of what loneliness is. It's also, when we feel thirsty, that's our sign to drink. When we feel hungry, it's our sign to eat. When we feel lonely, it's our sign to kind of reach out for more connection, more meaningful connection. So if you're experiencing loneliness, the number one thing I just mentioned is like recognizing, to start off with, that that's what you're experiencing. Because then you're able to go to kind of understand that what you need is meaningful connection. And in the same way that the number one thing to do to reduce stigma is talking about it, that's the number one thing to do for yourself. If you're experiencing loneliness, find someone that you can trust, that you can tell that you're experiencing loneliness. And I think it's also, people being aware if someone comes to you, because actually, like we said, the stats show that most people aren't talking about it. So if someone comes to you and says, I'm actually feeling really lonely, what do I do? And we always say, respond with kindness, and then, support that person to understand what it is they need. Because it could be something really simple that's like, they have a hobby that they haven't been doing for ages because they've been having to work too much or look after their family or whatever it is, and they've like lost that thing that was made them happy and made them themselves, and they're starting to feel like they don't have that anymore. So it's rediscovering those aspects of yourselves that make you feel, where you find those connections that are meaningful to you, where you rediscover parts of yourselves and you feel like you're in a community of people that you feel emotionally connected to. So it's those three actions really. It's acknowledging it, talking about it, and then taking action to rediscover.
Great, thank you. And I mean, obviously, with the work that you're doing is very important in regards to helping people understand, firstly, what loneliness is, and then secondly, what can be done about it. I guess just from the time that you've been involved, what's kind of any of the kind of positive, perhaps, case studies or things that you've seen during your time?
Yeah, I think it's just the sheer amount of different activities that people will, anything from, I'm going to put the kettle on for an hour and then just invite my community into my garden space or my shop that I don't normally like open up to everyone, or whatever it is, all the way to full-on festivals people put on with, workshops and panel events. We've got a panel event that happened at Capitol Hill. There's a lovely lady, a wonderful person in Estonia who put on a art gallery all about her, how loneliness looks to her. So it's just, I think it's like seeing all of those variety of ways that people choose to connect. And it really is, loneliness is an experience that everyone will experience, and it's personal to everyone. But once we kind of reach out and put that into a connection, that's also, it can be in so many wonderful ways that people choose to do that. So I think that's the thing that really inspires me personally to kind of, keep talking to people about it, because once you see the impact of that connection on people, we had during Loneliness Awareness Week, we held our summer party where we bring our the people who've been on our Marmalade Connections project together with their volunteers, and celebrate them and help them get to know each other, and just have like a celebration for them, and seeing that as well, seeing the people kind of the connections they've made and where they've come from, where they might have been. So I think that's really inspirational to me as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. So if I could just take this opportunity to thank you finally for your time today, but also thank you, your organisation, for all the work that they're doing in this space. As I say, it's the first time I'd seen kind of loneliness mentioned was on that WhatsApp message, and it inspired me to kind of find out a little bit more. Reached out to yourselves, and you were kind enough to agree to come on the show. So just very, very grateful for your time this evening, and it'd be great to pick up the conversation next year when we have the next year's Loneliness Awareness Week as well. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we are fast approaching our advert break. Listeners, please do stay with us, and in the second half of today's show, we'll be talking about fatherhood, particularly in the 21st century. So please do stay with us, and we'll be back after this short commercial break. Assalamu alaikum.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Gems and jewels, wise sayings, interesting events, and moral lessons from Islamic history. Sustenance.
Among the signs of faith is that one does not look to please others and incur Allah's anger in that process. One avoids praising others for the sustenance that they have received from Allah, the Exalted, and also refrains from blaming others for sustenance that he has not received from Allah, the Exalted. Allah's distribution of provision is not increased for a recipient by the amount of greed or ambition that he shows, nor is it blocked by his hate or envy. Allah, in his infinite justice, grants provision and contentment for those with strength of faith and satisfaction with what is divinely ordained. Likewise, misery and discontent are for those that live with doubt and anger. Let us be satisfied with his will.
Greystone Solicitors are committed to protecting your rights and fighting your corner to ensure you get the best possible results, specialising in immigration matters, employment issues, family matters, personal injury, medical negligence, civil litigation and housing. Need help with your immigration problem? Greystone Solicitors provide free immigration drop-in clinics every Friday. Call Greystone Solicitors today on 01582 343 453 or visit us at 275 Dunstable Road, Luton, LU4 8BS and begin your journey towards justice today.
My name is Dawood Masood. Keep sharing the love by giving out the roses and spread the happiness. And listen to Inspire 105.1 FM.
Biscard Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton. Stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscard Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscard Pharmacy, 157A Biscard Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Have you heard? Have you heard the exciting news?
What exciting news is that?
To celebrate their 60th anniversary, Ambala Sweets are launching their Dubai Chocolate Barfi from Saturday 24th of May.
So we can visit the Ambala Sweets store at 211 Dunstable Road in Luton and now buy Dubai Chocolate Barfi.
Yes, it'll be available from Saturday 24th of May and so much more.
That's fantastic. Don't miss out. Dubai Chocolate Barfi and many more tasty sweet treats at Ambala, Dunstable Road in Luton and all Ambala stores.
इस्लामी नुक्ता निगाह से इल्मी और फिक्री मौज़ूआत का जायजा, इस्लाम की इंसानियत साज़ तालीमात का ख्याल अफरोज़ तज़किरा, रवादारी और बक़ाए बामी क़ज़ामिन, फ़िक्र व नज़र की तत्हीर और अख़लाक़ी बालीदगी पर मबनी मौज़ूआत पर ताक़ीकी गुफ्तगू, वक़्त, हालात और माहौल के तक़ाज़ों के मुताबिक समाजी इस्लाह क़ज़ामिन। सुनते रहिए और सवालात पूछिए। इंस्पायर FM पर प्रोग्राम सदाए तकदीर हर बुध दिन 11 बजे प्रोफेसर मसूद अख्तर हजारी के साथ।
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Any health advice given, whether general, diet, physical or spiritual, is general only and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host, Suliman Rafiq, and we are broadcasting live today on Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025. Feels like this year is flying by again, and it's hot out there. Take care of yourself, guys, and please do keep an extra eye out for any elderly neighbors or any particularly young children as well, because it's going to get really warm this weekend. So they're expecting temperatures of 33 degrees. So the key messages are to try and stay out of the sun during the hottest parts of the day. Just try and keep your house cool by closing windows and curtains that face the sun, and ensure that if you do go out that you apply sunscreen and seek shade. Drink plenty of water as well. So please, inshallah, do take care of yourselves and each other throughout expecting this weekend, and it may well be longer as well. So thank you for listening to us on that. In regards to today's show, in the first half of today's show, we were discussing the topic of loneliness. It's the first time we've ever picked that up on the Health and Fitness Show. So it was really great to understand what loneliness is and how it can impact us and what we can do about that particularly. And it actually kind of nicely connects on to our next topic, which is in regards to fatherhood, particularly in the 21st century. So I'm delighted to be joined by two expert guests. So firstly, if I could ask Sharon to introduce herself.
Yes, so I'm Sharon Hill, and I'm the Community Volunteer Coordinator for the project of Flying Start.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. And Ash?
And I'm Ash McCormack. My principal role is as a senior lecturer at the University of Bedfordshire, but I'm a volunteer, happy to volunteer for some time now, that helps Sharon and others coordinate, run and operate a dad's group here in Luton.
Fantastic. So I'd like to start with the dads group. So firstly, for anyone that hasn't heard about it, what is the dad group? What is the dads group, and why does it exist?
So Dad's Group came about when we had a lot of changes that went through with the Luton Council in terms of children's centres, etc., being closed. And Flying Start, along with the Early Years Alliance charity, we fought hard to keep some sort of resemblance of what early years and the importance of early years really. Out of that, and the bigger picture of what it all represents, was looking at working more closely with the community. So therefore we set up what's called, the formality word was co-production, but we preferred the word working together group. So we got people from the community, not just the community, but also professionals, etc., sit around a kind of table once COVID had permitted. Most of it was virtual to begin with. And it came about by saying, well, why haven't we got something for the dads group? So in its kind of formation of it is really looking at what the community are telling us, rather than the other way around, which tends to be the case, that people go out and say, right, we've got this money, we're going to do this, without actually consulting the community. So I think from a Flying Start element, that was a fantastic way to start, which was to actually ask the community. Hence, how I got involved with Ash was really about Ash coming along to see about volunteer placements, because that fundamentally is my role, supporting the community to become volunteers within the organisation, which I have to say we have a really healthy record around that in terms of growing confidence and growing our own really into wonderful situations, especially last guest talking about loneliness. A lot of that comes up in conversations as why they want to volunteer as well. So Ash came along, and not realising that I was going to rope him in to be a volunteer.
And some years later.
And some years later, he's still here. And really, I take my hat off to him, because he is the lead in what is now quite a popular group for us, which is the dads group.
Great.
So, yeah.
So Ash, just talk us through, so if you're a dad in Luton, what's the dads group, and why would anyone want to go along?
We would always like to do more. But there's always bumps in the road that sort of prohibit that. But primarily, it's a group that runs once a month, usually the last Saturday in the month. And it's just a 1.5 to 2 hour space for dads to come with their children. We say dads, but we also include male carers, so that could be uncles, grandparents, foster carers, for example. So any sort of adult male who has a caring responsibility. One of the things we'll talk about in a little while, hopefully, is the NSPCC and safeguarding, because safeguarding isn't necessarily about just your children. It's about other people's children too, and those conversations that we have. But really, with the Dads group, we run it once a month. But the idea is that it's low pressure. We try to coincide it with themes, so stuff like men's mental health, as an example. And we kind of use it as a drop-in, a fairly sort of informal environment for dads to network, talk to each other, spend some time with their children, ask honest questions, but also to be able to understand that there's people out there that they can ask questions of, or things. So a really good example, like we have with dads, is, well, what is my role? You know, how am I useful?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we're aware of is that parenthood comes with great expectation, but we don't talk about the roles of fatherhood in quite the same detail. So it's trying to recognize that with the 21st century sort of parenting is that our children's lives have adapted and evolved, and we need to adapt and evolve accordingly. In as much that what we tend to find is that since the 1970s, for example, the role of a mother has now become not compromised, but more is required. We call it the double shift. So what we tend to find is that mums are also mums, but they're also working. And what we tend to find is sometimes the dad's default position is that of provider, but not necessarily one of nurturer, because men don't always see themselves as being nurturing in that way. But what we also find from research and evidence is actually dads really want to be involved, but there's a lack of certainty as to what that usefulness should look like.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I was really interested to pick up on, in terms of like you referred to, obviously COVID changed the world, you know, and now you've got different people are working in lots of different ways, lots of working from home going on, and, you know, various different kind of changes that we've seen. And you know, before the show we were talking about how in 2025 it feels as though that although men want to be involved, they might not necessarily really get their heads around how best to be involved, and actually then that can result in a kind of negativity.
It's a wider issue. It's a political issue. So an example is that within the United Kingdom we have the worst paternity leave in Europe. So whereas other countries will say, look, you have a year, you can divide it between the mum and the dad, you can do a month here and a month there, a week here, a week there. Dads get 2 weeks. Providing that everything goes smoothly. And so there's some research out there that says in the last trimester, really, there's a high level of anxiety within the dads, because it's now getting to that point of what's going to happen next. But in the first 6 months, there's also issues around heightened levels of anxiety leading to depression, because it's fairly easy for dads to feel invisible because everything else is going on over there. And so sometimes I think the default position for men might be, my usefulness is in providing, and they lose that connection very early on. If they don't within those first 2 weeks, they might just feel that they're always catching up with the time, so they'll spend a weekend or an evening or bath time or bedtime, and they just lose that connection that perhaps other people get.
Absolutely. Because I mean, Sharon, from the work the Flying Start do is a lot of emphasis on the first 1001 days, particularly
1001 critical days.
Absolutely. And so I mean, firstly, why is that important for someone who might not have heard that before?
So the term 1001 critical days can be a political mindset as well, in terms of who's in government at the time and what priorities placed on early years. So we know fundamentally that most development and the most prolific development takes place during that time. So we do have procedures where let's look at antenatal right through until the child is 2.5. We know at that point we start to connect whether the brain's developing, whether we're going to look at anything that might come up by the time they're 2.5, which is why it then is connected to the health visitors doing the development checks, etc. The point is, the sooner you navigate something that might need to be investigated more, put more support in, is the easier it becomes in terms of how that child's trajectory and pathway will be. So the focus of the 1001 critical days has a significant point of contact, really. And a lot of it is about how we engage with children at that time. The brain is formulating, it's making all these different synapses and connections. And if that is broken, the easiest way I try and tell volunteers sometimes, which is probably not the best way, but if you look at research many moons ago, this shows how old I am, by the way, but when we looked at orphanages and when there was no contact with children, adult stimulation, etc., and what happens to those children, the outcome is not great. So we know more and more about what happens during that time, during the development, from pregnancy, I might add, right through to the 1001 critical days of being 2.5.
Because I remember, thank you. And actually, I remember when hearing that about, this is a really important time, huge brain development, etc. I remember thinking, I was just going to wait till he was old enough to kick a ball, and then here comes dad. All right, let me take you down to the park, kind of thing, But actually, in those early days, and things like nappy changing, for example, we might be like, I don't know how to do this, and then naturally go, I'll just leave it to the expert, aka someone else. So I mean, in terms of dads and the first those early years, what does kind of good look like?
I mean there's a lot of pressure about what good should look like, and it tends to sort of bounce around. What from social media is there's fads and fashions. Do you let a child cry? Do you not let them cry? When do you do this? When do you do that? And there's lots of issues about, is it quality or is it quantity? But I think the role of dads is it's somewhat marginalized because they don't have either the quality or the quantity in that respect. They just kind of make do with the time that they have. And I think you're right. I think there's a masculine element about the dad you want to be and the dad the child needs. And there's some interesting research which says that actually sometimes dads want to be more involved, but they'll wait to be asked because the default position is, I'll get it wrong. And so some of the dads that we've met at the Fathers Group is that their expectation is, I don't want to mess this up. And actually, with the right encouragement and the right support, like any risk, we grow because it's manageable and we get confidence and it changes. So I think any position that allows you to grow alongside your child, so you can relate to that. I absolutely hear what you say. I mean, the issue is, I think as a dad, you think your relationship with your children will get easier as they get older. But I think in that first 1001 days, you have to connect. One of the things we talked about earlier is that children don't, very early on, they don't just sit there and do nothing. Their little brain is developing. It's wiring away. It's not just. It's just not absorbing. It's processing, and you're part of that. And so I think that then what dads tend to sometimes do is absorb the time they have with their children with good time stuff. Let's go to the park. Let's go to a cinema. It's not necessarily understanding what the child needs. It's do stuff. Because that's the feel good stuff.
Absolutely.
And I like your point, particularly about changing the nappy, because I always default and say, well, does a woman know how to change a nappy? It's a learning curve for both, really, both who are involved as parents. And I think for me, I was raised with 3 boys, so I'm used to being the default female in the family, and again, culturally, that comes with other responsibilities. But when I've seen my son, he has made me a grandmother, and so proud of what I observe and see. And I think it resonated even more with me in terms of how dads are excluded. When we look at the system that we have and what we've created, which is no fault of anybody's, but it's just become the default of that dads are not involved. And I always tell the story of when my granddaughter's a COVID baby, but that's another story in itself. But he felt so pushed out as a father. He felt and I don't know if midwives or health visitors realize this, and it's kind of changing our mindsets as workers ourselves in terms of in that industry as well, how we navigate that. But also we've at Flying Start, we've become UNICEF accredited to support around breastfeeding, and that was a wonderful conversation. I don't know if you remember that one, when a dad asked how do I support my wife with breastfeeding? And it was just like a moment for us because we could actually have this conversation with him because he really desperately wanted to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the there's the research around how amazing breastfeeding is for children is miraculous, really. So I think just you mentioned there your connection with the NSPCC and the work around kind of keeping children safe. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, bringing up children is getting more complicated because there's so many more influences on your children's lives. So you've got your carers and your childminders, and you've got your family members, and there's lots of people who, for whatever situation, find themselves involved in your children's life. Some of that's enforced because you've got to work, some of it is voluntary, and so on and so forth. But I think that with safeguarding, previously safeguarding was only associated with child protection.
Yeah.
And the issue with child protection is it tends to be reactive. What local authorities should be doing is promoting welfare, not responding to welfare issues when they're compromised. So part of this sort of safeguarding event we've got on the 12th of July with the NSPCC is to try to get, and we've spoken to the dads about this, and one of the issues they do have around safeguarding is stuff like social media. How often does my child, when do I get a mobile phone?
Yeah.
How much is too much? And it's just about getting sort of adults and dads particularly to recognize that they do have an active role in so they might take on that kind of that role of provider and disciplinarian and protector, but actually protecting children has many more subtleties now. And the message that I use is that I'm trying not to be an analog dad to my 5G children. And because as they've grown up with technology as a given, they breathe it, they walk it, and I'm always catching up. So one of the things that you know about safeguarding, particularly with sort of prior research, is that children will often tell other children that they're not happy. And it's those other children that may tell their parents if it's a secure relationship. So how do we respond if your child comes home and says, my best friend is saying they're not happy at home because this happens? What do we do? Because I think there is a tendency to think perhaps it's not my business. But if someone is telling you, they're telling you for a reason, and you're involved. And I think that's really important. So the issue with what we're running with the NSPCC is a very sort of low-key event, but just to develop that confidence to be able to say, what am I looking at, or what is being said, and who do I talk to? Did someone else see that as well? One of the things that was interesting about COVID is that because dads were spending more time at home, they were much more acutely aware of how their children were behaving. It's like, do they always behave like that? And one of the issues we have with some of the children, with the dads, is developmental. Like, when does my child start talking? Why aren't they making friends? And there's a lot of anxiety around special needs and disability, about that anxiety about asking the question because the answer you get might be disconcerting. But going back to the NSPCC, it's very much that view about giving people confidence to not necessarily call out what they see, but to be able to relate it to someone else and go, did you see that as well? And then talk it through.
I mean, the theme is called Listen Up, Speak Up, and that's a national program that they're rolling out. But it's also getting parents to understand that just because something's designed in the 21st century doesn't mean it's always good. And in my experience, because my background is early years, so that's kind of my remit. I don't go beyond that. But what we do know is that screen time is damaging in those 1,001 critical days, and how you use screen time with your children plays a massive role in terms of behavior, outcomes, speech and language development, for example. So we try and get that across to the dads as well. So not just what we do as an organization, but certainly in the dads group as well.
And I think when we talk about safeguarding and child protection, sometimes the public imagination goes to the adverts that you see on the television, or they think about children in immediate harm, so more sort of risk situations. So is this about physical abuse or violence or sexual abuse? Whereas actually there's lots of other safeguards. So for me, safeguarding is what are the bumps in the road that prevent that child developing and realizing their potential? And that might be smaller things like obesity, poor diet. It might be about reading with your son or reading with your daughter. So it's not always the big scary safeguarding. Doesn't have to be the big scary things. It's the small things that matter, like how do you talk to your children? How do you punish how do you reason with your children when they're being unreasonable? So again, safeguarding is just developing those little talents to communicate more effectively, not just the big stuff that you hear about when it all goes horribly wrong in the news.
Definitely. Thank you. So listeners, you are live with us here on Inspire 105.1 FM. Today is Thursday, the 19th of June, rather, 2025. And if you'd like to get in touch, the telephone number is 07779 481822. That number again, 07779 481822. I mean, I think just coming back then in terms of some of the positives, the fact that there was demand for a dad's group, who would have thought that, like even 10 years ago, maybe, the fact that, and dads are attending this group. And I was just curious in terms of like, obviously you're volunteering your time to run this. What do you see as some of the big benefits that have come of it? Has there been any kind of magic moments?
For me as a volunteer, I think it's for because we've been doing this for a few years now. It's for parents that come back and you're literally seeing the children sort of grow. And on occasions you see some of the anxieties that the dad have become diminished, and the child has gone from being quite quiet to actually being quite outgoing.
Amazing.
And just that sort of levels of confidence, really, of seeing sort of happy children and confident dads. So we had a really good example where one of my dads came down and their little boy, obviously very much for apple of their eye. He had the kind of the clothes, he had the expensive tops and the joggers. And some of the anxiety was when his child was playing in the sand pit, it was like, don't get dirty. It's like, no, bring him down in his old joggers, let him get sandy, let him do the finger painting, let him do that stuff. And you can see the not just the expectation of, am I getting this wrong from the dad, but, oh, that's okay. He's allowed to get his hands dirty. Oh, okay, I'll do more of that. And just to see them kind of connect. So instead of the father kind of going, don't do this, don't do that, they start to laugh together. And he responds to his child's needs, and the pressure is taken off. And that's really important.
Fantastic. So just for any listeners who are interested in getting involved or maybe attending, for example, where can they find out more information?
The Flying Start website. And don't ask me to quote.
Google.
The Flying Start website has all the information ranging from the sessions that are provided across the week, all of the activities that we do. We had a fantastic picnic in the park yesterday. Over, I would say, at least 300 people in attendance. And remarkably, I would say, we saw a lot more dads.
Fantastic.
We kept noting that yesterday and saying, wow, there seemed to be a lot more dads and a lot more interest in asking about, because I had this lovely banner saying Dad's Group. And we actually engaged with conversations around that. So yes, our website covers all the information and how to sign up for the NSPCC training, which is a free training. It's just giving up a couple of hours of your time to come along and have those conversations.
I think also what's really encouraging is that there were lots of dads at the family picnic, but also kind of talking to mums. If we only rely on communicating with dads, sometimes they're kind of hard to find because they're doing other things. So half of my conversations were talking to mums and just saying, perhaps you want to talk to your partner, your husband, or if you're an adult. We had foster care we were talking to, and they went, oh, wow, we didn't know this was happening. This is amazing. So often it's word of mouth of one person tells another person.
That's right.
And then they bring a lot from along as well. So it's not just about reaching out to dads. It's encouraging mums to say to the dads, hey, there's a group over there. Go and talk to them about some of the things that perhaps you can't talk to me about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's free time for mums.
It's 2 hours.
2 hours.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think a bit of dedicated time, isn't it? In terms of just because, so many of us are doing it, aren't we? We're trying our best, and we think about how we were raised and reflect on, like, let's do the opposite of that kind of thing.
And that is a true statement. That is a true statement. That was something that was said. I don't want to be like my parents. I want to do things differently. I want to be a part of my child's life and watch what's happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, we're very fortunate now, aren't we, that we have potentially more time than we've had before, in terms of more flexibility around work, etc. as well. Apologies, we are now in the last 50 seconds of today's show. So maybe if I could just ask you both just to kind of give a 10-15 seconds summary or key point that you'd like to make.
The next Dad's group is the next Saturday, the 28th
of June.
So come along.
Great.
And just sort of reach out. It's low level, it's low pressure. We're a drop-in centre as well, so we can just talk things through. You can have some one-to-one if you want, but just if you're not sure, just come along. Just check it out.
Where is it?
It's at
Parktown Family Hub.
Yep.
Bailey Street, which is just past, I always say, go past Iceland and keep walking. Or if you're driving, it's Bailey Street, LU1 3DU.
It's in the shadow of the flats.
It's in the shadow of the flats, yeah.
I know very well, know the area very well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, guys. Apologies, we've run out of time. Listeners, thank you very much for being with us today on Inspire 105.1 FM. We'll be back next Thursday with another episode of the Health and Fitness Show. Until then, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.